Welcome to Meg's Mysteries, stories of murder, mystery, and mayhem. Sit back and listen to some ghost stories that will make the hairs stand up on your neck, or murder most foul. Who done it? So enjoy and hit that subscription button and share if you dare. Windows of the Soul, Chapter 1. She appeared like a spirit in the night. I looked up from my paperwork piled so high I had to rise from my chair just to see her. She was a small, well-built blonde with beautiful violet eyes that would take any man's breath away, although I bet men don't usually notice the eyes first. We were working on our latest cold case. That is what my partner and I do, cold cases, to give the victims the last chance, a voice on how they died and why. But this one seemed like a dead end, pardon the pun. My partner just left his desk for coffee, or I would have seen his stare as she walked into the room. I knew where he would look first. Even a man like Doug McCann could not help himself. She was that beautiful. He is a decent man, hard-working and loyal, but the vision of her would have taken his breath away too. I am a female and I couldn't take my eyes off her. She was perfect. Her eyes just stared at me like she was looking into my soul. She asked in a dainty, sweet voice, "Are you Detective Sergeant Channing? The man at the desk pointed you out." I said, "How can I help you? I am Detective Sergeant Catherine Channing. I go by Cat. And my partner is Detective Sergeant Doug McCann." She said very coolly, "No, I'm here to help you." Just then, as I put my hand out for her to sit, Doug came in with 2 coffees and danishes. He almost dropped both. I introduced him to her, and I said, "Please sit and tell us what you can do for us." She sat down like she was floating on a cloud. Yes, she looked just like an angel. A small face, perfect blonde, long curly hair, and a beautiful shaped lips, and those beautiful eyes. So intense was her stare, I couldn't imagine what she wanted or what could be so urgent at this late hour. Doug and I worked a graveyard shift. We prefer late hours. She said, "I'm here to help you. I have important information about some old and some new cases that you are working on." How did she know what we were working on? I thought. Maybe she has a sixth sense. She said, "But first you must go to this address. I will wait here for you to return." She smiled and handed me a handwritten note with the house address. And she said, "You will find out all the answers there, and I will tell you the rest when you come back." Doug just looked at me. Then both of us looked at her with questioning eyes. She said, "I'll wait right here," and then she said no more. I told her we will check it out. We didn't know if she was a crackpot or someone who just wanted attention. She was very calm and didn't look like a nut. We were going nowhere with what we were working on now, so we will check it out. She didn't look like she would leave if we didn't. I told the officer at the desk to keep an eye on her and get her anything she needed, just keep her there. So she sat at my desk and we left. As we got into the car, I said, "I can't believe we are doing this, but you never know." Doug smiled and said, "What could she possibly have information on? Did she say what case?" I said, "You heard everything I said," she said to me. She handed me the address, and you know as much as I do. So we drove to the house at 150 Starway Lane, Long Island, New York. Chapter 2. A perfect house for a perfect person. It was still late that night as we pulled up. All lights were on at the house. The floodlights on the outside. It made it very easy to see everything. It was a 2-story white with green shutters, an older home. It looked very well kept, just like a normal American home. Trees and flowers and well-maintained lawn on about an acre of property. In the back, a very thick group of trees, weeping willows, huge pine trees that must have been planted many years ago. Tall hydrangeas and forsythia bushes all around the sides of the house, like a living fence. Sweet-smelling flowers with beautiful colors all around, solar lights all along the sidewalks, and more flowers on the wraparound porch. Doug said, "I wouldn't want her electric bill. It's a good thing the neighbors are so far away. This house is lit up like a Christmas tree." The only two houses were about a mile away, and the trees separated both from either side of the house. Across the street was a small lake. In a note under the address, she wrote, "The key is in the frog's mouth." There was a stone frog on the porch by some of the potted plants. He sat there like a king in a flower garden, his mouth wide open, like he was greeting us with a big hearty smile. Inside was a small box and a key to the house. I opened the front door. The house was immaculate. The smell was fresh and clean. Beautiful antique furnishing, and they were all polished and well kept. Doug said, "What are we looking for?" I shrugged and we walked in. We went from room to room. It was all nice and neat, no clutter, and everything in its place. Plants, flowers in every room. A burst of color from African violets, lilies, orchids in every color you can imagine. But the sweet smell didn't overpower us as we went from room to room. And in the back of the house was a huge solarium, the whole length of the house. All glass from top to bottom, and all filled with plants and flowers. Doug said, "Is she trying out for House Beautiful meets the Garden Club? Looks like a hothouse in here. What does she want to sell us the house?" I said, "Let's check upstairs." There were 4 bedrooms and a bathroom. When we went to the back bedroom, it must have been hers. The other ones didn't look like anyone used them for a very long time. It had the look of a small girl's room. It was like a time capsule filled with small girl things. A bed with a white canopy, frilly curtains, and a dresser with old perfume bottles, a brush, a comb, and a mirror set on a crystal tray. A music box, jewelry box, with a small ballerina that danced when you opened the lid. I smiled and said, "I had one like this when I was about 6 years old. I think almost every little girl had one." On the nightstand was a picture, the only picture that was in the whole house. A small blurry picture of an old woman and a small child. You could make out the woman's face smiling down at the little girl, but you couldn't see anything but the back of her head with her arms raised up to the old lady. I said to myself, "Wonder why this is the only picture in the whole house." We went through the whole upstairs and I went back to her room. There has to be something she wants us to find, but what? Then I noticed under the mirror on the dresser a piece of paper sticking out. I picked it up and a key also fell. The note said, "Go to the door under the steps." "What is this?" Doug grunted. He was tired of all this cloak and dagger clues. "Is she running us around like a wild goose chase?" I said, "Let's go check it out. Something's weird and is waiting for us." Doug said, "Well, I hope we find it soon." Chapter 3. Careful of what you wish for. We took our guns out and slowly opened the door, down the steps to another door. The key opened both doors. The door at the bottom had a red light outside of it. I said, "Maybe it's a dark room. Maybe that's where all the pictures are." Doug opened the door and it was full of cameras and equipment. It was a dark room. In the back was another door. You couldn't see it until you walked in. I said, "Here we go, this has to be it." I opened the door and it was not locked, and I put on the lights. Then all eyes were on us. We gasped and both stepped back in surprise. Eyes everywhere staring at us. The whole wall was covered with pictures of eyes, from ceiling to floor. There were no flowers in this dark, gloomy room, only those horrible pictures of eyes staring dead at us. The only furniture was a desk with a computer and a bookcase in the very corner of the room. The bookcase was filled with tapes and ledgers, all very neatly organized. What the hell are we looking at? Let's get the answer downtown and get a unit in here. Don't touch anything, I yelled out. I think I know what she's trying to tell us. Oh God, I hope I'm wrong. As I turned to Doug, I knew he was thinking the same thing. I looked back at the house as we pulled away. All I saw was a well-kept home, normal to anybody who passed it, but not so normal to us now. We knew why she sent us here. We got back to the station in record time. I hoped she would still be there. On the way, I called the desk sergeant. He said, "Yes, she's still here. She hasn't moved since you left, and she didn't want anything when I asked." I said, "Good, we'll be there soon. Keep her there." He said, "No problem. She's something to look at." Man, I thought to myself, they'll never change. Doug was driving, and we sat in silence, but we were both thinking the same thing. This has to do with our latest cold case. We were working on it for such a long time with no end in sight. We both thought it would never be solved and would wind up back in storage. It was too eerie that she just walked in and gave us information that can help close the case, maybe more. It was all over the news about a year ago, and no one could solve it. The killer just vanished. Could this be what she was talking about? How could she help us? Well, we'll soon find out. She seems willing to talk to us. All we have to do is listen. I told Doug, we'll take it slow and let her tell us everything she knows. He says, I don't care how long she takes as long as she gives us something. This case is starting to bug me, and I want it closed for good. Hopefully she has a lot more to tell us from what we saw in the room with all those dead eyes. They sure creeped me out. I told him, I know exactly what you meant. She had so many pictures and I could tell they were real. I also thought of how an angel-looking woman could be involved with such a horrible crime, and how did she do this all alone? Chapter 4, Her Story. When we got to the station, I walked right up to her and said, "Okay, we are listening." She smiled and said, "Okay, here's my story." She refused a lawyer, and she said, "I'm ready, get your recorder. This one is a killer of a story, and I don't want you to miss a thing." We went to the interview room. Doug rolled up his sleeves and hit the button on the recorder. She looked at him right in the eye and said, "You'll need a lot more tapes." I sat down across from her and said, "Whenever you are ready." She smiled and said, "I have been ready to share my story for a while." She smiled and stated her name for the recorder. "My name is Miss Dorothy Wiles. You can call me Dot. Dorothy is so Wizard of Oz. I have come here on my own free will to give myself up. I am finished with my task, and I will tell you my whole story. But first, a poem I wrote when I was young. This will be the beginning of my story. The eyes are like the windows of the soul. No matter who you are, this I know. I look and see into your eyes. You can't fool me with all your lies. I see what you think of me, the look of disgust. It all comes through your eyes. Your soul looks at me with those hate through your eyes. I know everything you are thinking. And soon you will see, like a pane of glass in a window, it will shatter and break. Your eyes, like the windows, will crack and close forever. You will see me no more. No more your looks of disgust and desire, just empty, closed eyes. I will be free from your stares, your hurtful expression. I will be free." And then she stopped and said, "I know this doesn't make any sense to you right now, but when I'm finished, you will understand and know what it means. I was very young when I wrote it. and it all started when I was just a little girl. She sat up straight and said, "Here we go. I'm 39, could you believe it? I know I look much younger. I had some help, you know." And then she winked at me. New face, new hair, and my new windows. Then she just started laughing. I said, "Stop the tape." Doug looked at me. I said, "Look, you came to us. Stop all this wasting our time." She said very sternly, "I will not waste your time or mine, but you will have to bear with me. Sorry." "Okay, I'm ready. Let's go." I had my captain and a few detectives watching me from the other room. I had to take control of the situation, so I said, "Okay, start from the beginning. I'm listening." She sat up and started again. "My story goes way back. Think of a young girl nobody wanted. Only one person in the world who loved and saw me for who I truly was. She was my Granny Gail. Granny Gail raised me until her death. I was about 7 and had to go live with my mother, who hated me and couldn't stand to look at me. That is why I was living with Granny Gail. From the start, my mother just handed me over as soon as I was born. The house I sent you to was Granny's, and she left it all to me, her little dot. She also left me very well off, but not until I was 21. So I had to fend for myself and live with my mother, who didn't want anything to do with me. She couldn't touch any of my inheritance, and in Granny's will she had an allowance only if she took care of me. Granny knew if she left her anything, she would just spend it on booze and drugs and men. So she reluctantly took me in. I had to take care of myself. My drugged-out, worthless mother only took me in for the money. It was a slum apartment in Chicago. That's where my nightmare story begins. So many of her boys, as she called them. She pushed me aside like I was never there. She could care less what happened to me. She couldn't even look at me, and she called me names like Hoot Owl because I had crossed eyes and I needed special thick glasses. That made me look awful. She told me I wasn't even her kid. She could not have such an ugly, bug-eyed brat. She said, "Your father took one look at you and ran, so you were so pathetic to look at." But her boys looked at me through their staring eyes. They followed me everywhere, from the time I was 7 till the time I was 16. That's when I had enough of those eyes and the things they did to me. I don't have to spell it out. At first, I couldn't understand how people could do such things to anyone. The only other person who took an interest and cared for me was an old doctor friend of Granny's, Dr. Hadley. Granny made my mother take me there for my eyes. It was a condition in the will, and that's the only way she would get her money, so she never missed an appointment with him. I loved going to see him. He was kind and loving, just like my Granny Gail. He never made me feel ugly like a bug-eyed little girl. He let me read all his books. I love to read and I love to learn new things. I soaked up knowledge just like a sponge. He told me I could be whatever I wanted to be. I only wanted to look normal and be free of my mother. The only thing she did that was nice was to leave me there for hours on end, and he didn't mind at all. We always had fun and loved spending time together. He talked to me about Granny Gail and how much she loved me. He always answered all my questions and was cheery, even though he had a busy practice. He never rushed me out. I could stay as long as I wanted, and I wanted to stay there and never go home. But eventually my mother came and picked me up, and I had to go back to hell and all those staring eyes. When I was in school, the teachers even stared at me and never cared. They only saw ugly. I was not worth their time. The kids were cruel and mean, like kids are. They only saw a freak. The torment was constant until I could take no more. Like I said, I soaked up everything I read. I researched ways to free myself from my pain. My first taste of freedom was my old English teacher, Mrs. Farley. She was mean and hateful. She would stare at me in class, and then she put me in the back so she couldn't see my eyes. She told me I gave her the creeps. How could a teacher say that to a kid? She just let the other kids make fun of me, and she laughed when they did. That's when I knew I had to shut her eyes for good, and my new life's work began. One day after school, I stayed. No one noticed me lingering in the hallway. She was all alone in her classroom, and I came up to her like I was going to ask a question about the classwork. She looked up from her paperwork and saw who it was. Her eyes looked at me with disgust. What? Like I was the last person she wanted to see. If she was only halfway human to me, some gleam of kindness or concern, like a teacher should be, someone would help and nurture children, especially ones who come up for help or knowledge. Not her. She liked power. She had to make children look helpless. They make them feel like dirt. Like she looked at me like I was an ugly bug she wanted to smash. She said, "What?" again. And I knew this person would never change. There was no hope of that. I smiled at her and said, "The gym teacher, Mr. Madden, asked me to see if you can meet him in the gym. There was a dance this Friday, and he wanted to ask her about the setup. They will use the gym for the dance." I knew she would drop anything she was doing to meet him. The gossip all around school was that they were fooling around. Both are married, but that doesn't stop that kind of people. It was just a big joke with all the kids. She was quite homely, and he was bald and dumpy, not like a gym teacher should look like. All the kids say, "I don't know how they do anything with her looks and his big belly." Oh, how they would laugh when they saw them give each other the eyes as they passed in the halls. But she thought she was the best-looking woman and so superior to everyone. He thought he was a Romeo. I guess their mirrors were broken. Unfortunately, that's how some people are. They only see what they want in themselves. She could have been pretty if she wasn't so mean and hateful to others. Then Dot stopped talking. Her bright blue eyes turned dark and distant, almost frightening. Her smiling lips went tight. She put her hands to her eyes and squeezed them and rubbed her temples. Then she asked Doug to turn off the recorder. She just needed to rest a while. I said, "Stop the tape. Do you want to take a break and have something?" She was there for a long time with no breaks. Dot tried to smile and say, "That would be wonderful, and I would love some coffee." Doug got up and she said, "Black, please. I just need a few minutes and we can get on with my story." He went to get the coffee, and I told her, "I'll be right back." She said sweetly, "That's fine, honey. I'm not going anywhere. Take your time." That's when I saw a true smile come across her face. I thanked her and she said, "No, thank you. If only other people in my life were as kind as you." Then she put her head down and the smile disappeared. I left her and went to talk to my captain and the others in the observation room. Doug dropped off her coffee in Danish, and he met us there too. The captain said, "This just fell in our laps. Make sure you get everything and don't do anything to mess this up." He's such a sweetheart, like we didn't already know how to do our jobs. I just looked at Doug and didn't have to say anything. He knew just what I was thinking. We were like an old married couple who spent many years together and didn't have to talk to communicate. We knew each other so well. Working so many years in cases together, we were like one person. I came to be his partner under horrible circumstances. His old partner was killed and died in his arms. He swore he would never have another partner after that. But the captain insisted, and I was new on the job. I just became a detective and was transferred to the cold case. I didn't know anyone here or anything about them. At first, he would only talk to me if he had to. For the first year, it was all business. We had a few good cases and some not so good. Cold cases are like that. You never know what you're going to get and what information you'll get to close them. Sometimes we took other cases when they needed help in other divisions, when they might connect to one of our cold cases. This was one. It was a drug deal we were helping on, and might be connected to some of our cases as well. One night we were on stakeout. A drug deal was going down by the strip club. The same dealer was involved with our case as he was with the murder of Doug's partner. They couldn't prove it, and he got away. Doug hated drugs, especially because of the case his partner was killed. Someone had set them up, and it was a massacre. Doug only survived because his partner jumped in front, and the shooters ran off. So he had to be on this case. He never saw the shooters, but he knew they were still out there and working with the same dealer. That is why we were on this particular case. Doug never told me anything about it, but other detectives told me his story. That's why he never keeps a partner too long. I never mentioned it to him and just wanted to learn from him, and he'll tell me when he feels he can. We did become close friends. He knew he can count on me, and I know I can count on him. We did have some of our setbacks, but I never met anybody so into getting the bad guys and doing things by the book. He is truly an honest and good person, and under his rough exterior, he was great. The night of the big bust, we were sitting in our car. I turned to him and said, "Let's get these dirt bags." I had a stern look on my face, and I meant it. He just stared at me at first and started to laugh. He had to put his hands over his mouth to muffle his laughter, as we were on a stakeout. He said, "Okay, now I know you're hanging around me way too much, but if you want, let's do it." We did get the dirt bags and started to be a real team. We got to put away the people responsible for Doug's partner's murder and drug dealers off the street. Doug seemed to become alive again and opened up to me. He watches my back, and I do the best to watch his. We are true partners and even best friends, and we are in this together. It's been 10 years together now, and we have the biggest break in a cold case, and it just fell in our laps. Now we're running with it. We have to do it for all the victims and their families to find peace and closure for them. No matter what Dot said and what they did to her, this did not justify taking their lives. We both believe every dog has their day, and if people were truly bad, in the end they will get just what is coming to them, by law or by God. Dot had no right at all, no matter what she thought. Doug turned to me and said, "Okay, partner, how do you want to work this one?" I said, "Let's let her talk it all out, get it on tape, and then check it all out. All by the book, just like you taught me. I want this one." She smiled, and he smiled, and he said, "Fine by me." I said, "Let's get him, Dano." He laughed and said, "That's the last time I tell you I like that old show. But we are not on Hawaii 5-0, and you are not Jack Ward." Now we got serious and headed back to the interrogation room. We found her sipping on her black coffee, the Danish untouched. She looked much better and ready to get back to business. She had a twinkle in her eye and said, "I'm ready." So Doug turned on the tape, and she started right where she left off. Mrs. Farley looked up at me from her work with those eyes, and I knew what I had to do to finally be free. She jumped up when she heard that Mr. Madden wanted to talk to her about the dance. Her face changed from stern to a semi-sweet, girly smile. But she didn't thank me or even notice I was there. She gathered her things and headed for the back stairwell to the gym, not noticing me following closely behind her. When she got to the steps, it was so easy. I simply pushed her as hard as I could. She tumbled down, making no noise, no scream, just a thunk, thunk, and then a crack of her head. No one was around, so I slowly walked down, and I knew she was dead. her eyes staring wide open in surprise. I laughed to myself. It felt so good. A taste of freedom at last. I took a picture of the eyes, and I simply closed them for good. Then I wandered out of the school feeling very proud of myself. I went straight to Dr. Hadley's house. He had his office right there, so I knew I would find him there. I told you Dr. Hadley was a dear friend of the family. He knew my grandfather and was very close to my Granny Gale. She trusted him with her life. She would say to me if I ever needed him, he would be there for me. She was right. He was kind and always there for me to run to, or if I just needed to get away when things got really bad. I would go and just bury myself in his books or help him in the office. I loved doing office work and helping him schedule his patients. He told me anytime I wanted to come, and he even gave me a key to his house. He also set me up on my first eye operation. That one didn't go so well. I had many scars, but he said, "Don't worry, we'll fix you up and make you the prettiest girl in the world. Not that you aren't pretty already. Your beauty lies deep inside you. We'll just bring it out." He looked at me with nothing but love, I guess because I was Granny Gale's little dot, and I think he truly loved me too. When I got to his house, he was just finishing up with a patient. He still had a very small practice, but he was never too busy for me. I put myself in a frightening state. It was very hard to do because I was quite happy with the taste of freedom, and I wanted more. It was like an addiction that took over my whole body. It felt so good for the first time in my life. Even as young as I was a great actor. I ran, crying crocodile tears into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. He said, "Dot, what has happened?" I just trembled in his arms. Finally, I raised my teary eyes and said, "I can't go back to that hellhole." He knew my mother's place, the dump. He said, "Calm down. You never have to go back. Tell me what happened." I hated to lie to him, but I had to get out of that house. I told him one of her boys was bothering me again, and she was too drugged out to see it. She doesn't care what happens to me as long as she gets what she wants. And he knew exactly what I meant. "Don't worry, she did it this time. I have more info on her and I would take care of everything. You can live here with me. I have such a big place. I will fight to become your legal guardian until you are of age. I think your Granny Gale would have wanted this. I am a trustee of your inheritance, and she will never win the fight. I have too much ammo against her." I said, "She probably won't even fight for me. She only wanted the money she would receive for having me there. She might fight for that." Dr. Hadley said, "Don't worry, I have enough ammo against her, and the court will not let you go back to her and that horrible lifestyle." So that's what happened. I did go back to the apartment just to get my things. I didn't have much.
Tune in next time for the conclusion of Windows of the Soul. Murder.